Hello y'all, and welcome back to the channel where the biblical backgrounds matter. Before we dive into Job chapter 17, I think it's important to go and look back through the previous chapters in order to review and see what has led up to all this. In Job chapters 1 and 2 you have the prologue. And then you have a dialogue in chapter 3. And then you have the first cycle, which is consolation, in chapters 4 through 14. You have your speakers, Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, and Job again, and Zophar, and then Job again. Now we're here in cycle 2, the fate of the wicked. In chapter 15, you have Eliphaz. In chapters 16 and 17, you have Job doing the speaking. Remember back in chapter 16, Job had just reproached and rebuked his friends who had been pitiless to him in his suffering. We'll also look back at some of the archaeological historical facts before we dive into Job chapter 17. This is from the surveys of the Old Testament. The purpose of archaeology is to recover the material culture of the peoples of antiquity, and so doing attempt to reconstruct their history and lifestyles. To achieve this goal requires the cooperation of a large number of technical specialists. First, to retrieve information and objects from below the surface of a chosen site, and then to evaluate and interpret their significance. Many sites of ancient cities preserve a layer of remains for each of the successive occupations of the settlement through their history. Each layer covers over the remains of the previous habitation. Excavation of these layers is painstakingly tedious, and methods have been designed to uncover one layer at a time to reveal the remains of each successive settlement. The most common objects found in Near Eastern archaeology are pieces of pottery. These can be classified by their characteristics and are helpful in developing a chronology of the site. Works of art, such as statues or reliefs, are found much less frequently. Tools and weapons reveal the technologies and skills of the people. Architecture also gets much mention for attention. From the various types of common houses to the most magnificent palaces, architecture can provide archaeologists and historians with an important key to understanding how people lived. Perhaps the greatest contributions to an archaeologist's task are finds that contain some written record. Near Eastern archaeology has much to contribute to biblical study. For the history and culture that it seeks to reconstruct overlap considerably with the background of the Bible. As a result, scholars and interpreters have often looked to archaeology to provide information that will help them understand the Bible better. It must always be remembered that Near Eastern archaeology and biblical studies are independent disciplines, even though They are certainly not unrelated. What archaeology can do for the Bible. The primary contribution of archaeology to biblical studies is the illumination it provides about life in biblical times, or in Bible times. This enlightenment includes the construction of a historical framework that makes use of information given in the Bible and supplements it with the finds of archaeology. And number two, the reconstruction of political situations that might supply cause and effect explanations for some of the events recounted in the Bible. And three, the recovery of some customs and practices that suggest reasons why people of antiquity acted the way they did. The last category is especially helpful when it sheds light on religious beliefs and practices in the ancient Near East. A secondary aspect of archaeology's role is the authentication. Archaeology occasionally helps those who seek to confirm that names, places, and events of the Bible are authentic and reliably reported. Basically, we know that the Bible is true because it has been proven historically and archaeologically. Everything in the Bible has a background and a context. It is either historical or prophetic or poetic or a promise from God. So now that we've read a little bit of the surveys of the Old Testament, and we read a little bit about archaeology, let's dive into Job chapter 17. Job prays for relief. He says in chapter 17, verse 1, "My spirit is broken. My days are extinguished. The grave is ready for me." Remember how much Job has suffered. He's had all of his material blessings taken away from him. His family has been killed. He's done everything that he knows that is right in the sight of the Lord. Verse 2, "Are not mockers with me? And does not my eye dwell on their provocation? Now put down a pledge for me with yourself. Who is he who will shake hands with me?" Job is praying to God. He is now questioning who will even have fellowship with him. He feels like he's been abandoned and neglected and forsaken. But the only answer that we truly get out of this is the sovereignty of God. The fact that God remains in control of the whole situation. Verse 4, "For you have hidden their heart from understanding, therefore you will not exalt them. He who speaks flattery to his friends, even the eyes of his children will fail." The word flattery is used in the context of lying, complimenting someone in order to make them feel good, in order to get something in return, which is what false prophets always do. That's what false teachers do when they're allowed to infest a church and take over whatever they want. That is why 1 John chapter 4 verses 1 and 2 says, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but test the spirits to see which ones are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Job 17:6, "But he has made me a byword of the people, and I have become one in whose face men spit." Job is basically the Old Testament example of the sufferings that Christ would go through for us, all the way to the cross. You'll remember that the Sanhedrin Council spit on Jesus. They hit him. They falsely accused him, much like Job's friends did to him. Let's read Job chapter 17 and verse 6 again. "But he has made me a byword of the people, and I have become one in whose face men spit." The term byword seems to mean that Job has become an example or a type of who was to come and who is to come again. Verse 7, "My eye has also grown dim because of sorrow, and all my members are like shadows. Upright men are astonished at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the hypocrite." Let's read that again. "My eye has also grown dim because of sorrow, and all my members are like shadows." Job is praying and begging God for relief. He is worn out by this time. He says, "Upright men are astonished at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the hypocrite." Who's the hypocrite? The one who points out the faults of others while not acknowledging his own. The one who says one thing and does another. Basically, the double-minded man. Verse 9, "Yet the righteous will hold to his way, and he who has clean hands will be stronger and stronger. But please come back again, all of you, for I shall not find one wise man among you. My days are past, my purposes are broken off, even the thoughts of my heart. They change the night into day, the light is near. They say in the face of darkness, if I wait for the grave as my house, if I make my bed in the darkness, if I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, you are my mother, and my sister, where then is my hope? As for my hope, who can see it?" Job has a long list of questions here. Just like men today do not always understand why they struggle through life on a daily basis. Neither did Job. God understands. He has a reason for everything. But we also know that God's grace is sufficient for us. If you cross-reference with Deuteronomy 29:29, it says that the secret things are only for the Lord to know. Job 17:16, will they go down to the gates of Sheol? Shall we have rest together in the dust? The word Sheol is a Hebrew word. Means the gates of hell, or simply the grave. Job had now felt like he had hit rock bottom. And therefore he prayed to God for relief. Much like we do in our lives. When things are good, we just sit back and relax. And we don't always think about praying to God or praising God until we start suffering. And then we pray to God and we question why we got in that situation in the first place, why we lost everything, when we could be praying to God from the moment that we wake up to the moment that we go back to sleep, and we could be serving Him with our whole heart as we should. But this was not the case for Job, because remember, way back in chapter 1 it says that he was an upright man who shunned evil and offered sacrifices daily to the Lord for his children, just in case they had sinned. So Job had reason to wonder why such things were happening to him. Suffering at that time was equated with sin, and prosperity was equated with righteousness and good works. We know now that's not always true. That sometimes there are people that do everything they possibly can to make sure that they pay their bills on time, that they never steal anything, and to make sure that they follow the law of the land. But they still struggle to get through life. And then there are those who steal and kill and destroy and get away with it. They'll stand out on a street corner and they'll lie to people and beg for money. We call them panhandlers, and 9 times out of 10 they're con artists. Some of them get a platform in big mega churches now, and they are really false prophets. They tell stories that amuse and flatter the crowds, and they make millions of dollars with their false prophecies and vague promises. And in the end, God's judgment on them is destruction. That's about all I've got for this lesson. Remember to leave your comments down in the comments section below. Any questions you might have, and if this video has been any help to you at all, or if you've learned anything from it, hit the thumbs up button, share it with your friends and family, and remember that biblical backgrounds matter. God bless y'all.